Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I wanted to talk more about mother-son enmeshment and how it ultimately is a type of developmental trauma where the son suffers from emotional abandonment. Now, it may not seem like it because you would think, well, enmeshment, isn't the person like too involved? How is this abandonment? It is a type of abandonment because that son is not being attended to for his true emotional needs and his true developmental process. So, what happens in enmeshment and in developmental trauma is that the mother parentifies her son, or there's another term that we call spousify, makes a spouse out of her son, makes a partner like, gives the son partner like duties. Again, many times this is happening unconsciously, by the way. It's oftentimes not maliciously. There's a whole complex sequence of things that happens that leads a mother to behave in this way with her son. But regardless, the consequences are the same. Regardless, it's a type of emotional abandonment that affects that son's emotional development and will lead to really detrimental consequences in that individual's life later on. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. So this is a process of parentification. The son has to essentially begin to attend to the emotional needs of the mother and fill those needs for her. So he begins to focus more on her emotional experience than he's focusing on his own, and most likely than she's focusing on his as well. So this leads to a type of self-abandonment because he learns that in order to focus on her, he has to shut his own process up. Again, all happening unconsciously. Probably if you suffered from this, you're just now coming into awareness and accepting that this is what was going on. And it's showing up in your life in ways that you may not even realize. So coming into this awareness is part of the healing process and is slow and often confusing. You definitely were not aware of it as you were growing up. Maybe something felt off, like intuitively, but being aware of it, using your conscious mind to be able to reflect on it as you were going through the process was probably not possible. You didn't have that capacity as a child. And so now as an adult, you're probably beginning to develop that awareness. Or if you are the partner of a mother enmeshment, he may not even be aware of this yet, but you're seeing it from the outside and you're like, oh my gosh, yes, that's what's going on. So again, in enmeshment, the son learns to pay attention to the mother's emotional needs, learns to fill her emotional needs, learns to soothe her, learns to be a confidant, learns to be a companion, learns to choose her above basically everything else in his life. And this is developmentally inappropriate because a child or an adolescent or even a young adult of a parent does not have the developmental capacity to support the emotional needs of another adult. They don't even have the capacity to support their own needs. They need all the help that they can get from other adults. Children are undergoing a very, very complex and demanding and confusing and messy emotional development process. They need tons of support from all types of adults in their lives, their parents, their extended family, their teachers, their mentors, their coaches, their community members. They just, childhood is very, very difficult emotionally. Emotions are messy. You're learning how to feel yourself, how to give name to the things you're feeling, how to self-regulate, how to contain, and transmute and process your emotions. And then the hardest part, what to do with them, separating emotions from behavior. you know okay, here's what I feel. How am I going to choose to act on that constructively in the world, constructively for myself, constructively for everyone around me? So children don't know how to do this. It's not appropriate for them to shut this process down, pause this process, interrupt this process in order to serve the needs of the adults in their circle. Like it's not fair to them. But this is what happens in mother-son enmeshment. So he has to quiet his own emotions and his own emotional needs. And because of this, he develops internalized shame. That's the consequence of developmental trauma. The direct consequence, you're the development of internalized shame, meaning the things that I feel, my emotions, my emotional needs, they are wrong because they are not, I'm not allowed to have them because there's something more important that I need to do, which is to attend to the needs of my parents or my mother in this case. So I'm not allowed to have my own. I'm bad for having my own emotional needs. I'm bad for having my own emotions that disturb the pattern of me focusing on my mom. If I feel anything, it's a burden. It's wrong. I don't pay attention to it, right? And so therefore I internalize, again, this is an unconscious process. This is happening in sort of the deeper layers of the psyche. So if I have these emotions that are wrong, that I'm not supposed to be feeling, then I feel bad about who I am. Because a child and adolescent, they don't distinguish, they can't distinguish between what they feel and who they are. Because what we feel is totally outside of our control. Like what we do with what we feel is within our control. But the things that naturally come up within us, it's an automatic process. So if that process is happening and we're feeling wrong for having that process, then it's like, and it's directly associated with who we are, then we're going to feel shame about who we are. We're going to feel bad about who we naturally are, and we're going to do what we can to hide that. So this creates a lot of repression, secrecy, hiding who we really are because we feel bad about who we are. We feel wrong for the things we feel and want and need. So this is internalized shame. And this internalized shame is essentially self-worth, right? It's a shot at our self-worth. We do not feel worthy of being a person that feels, of being a human being that has unique needs and wants and negative and positive emotions. And so essentially that we have our self-worth gets affected by mother-son enmeshment. This is the developmental trauma. We develop low self-worth. The son in this situation develops a very, very low sense of self-worth. Now, this may not look like this on the outside because he may develop a mask to compensate for low self-worth. So he may create this persona that puts on a performance in the world that may actually be very good at doing a lot of things. He may have this sense of bravado. He may have a lot of charisma. It depends on the son. It may show up differently, but that is the mask. Okay, if you were to take away his mask and his coping mechanisms and his defense mechanisms, deep down inside, he feels unworthy. So part of this mask is developing coping mechanisms to numb his emotions, to numb and distract from his emotions, because again, he feels wrong for having them. So when he's in the home, when he's in part of the family system, when he's experiencing closeness and intimacy with his attachment figures, he essentially numbs and distracts from his emotions because he feels like he's not worthy of having them, because his role is to serve the emotional needs of others, to make others happy, to put on a performance for others, to make them proud, to fill the loneliness of his mother, to protect her from her depression, from her sadness, from her frustration, from her anger, to be her confidant, to listen, to be her therapist, to listen to her complain about maybe the father, maybe other men in her life, maybe other people in her life, maybe work. So obviously he's going to develop this very complex ecosystem of coping mechanisms and distraction mechanisms. It could be a number of things. It could be, watching a lot of TV, video games, doom scrolling. It could be addiction to substances. It could be behavioral and process addictions. Um, Again, defenses in general that don't let him go into the deeper aspects of himself. Maybe if someone calls him out on something, he gets really defensive. He blame shifts. Sometimes even developing a type of narcissism, not NPD itself, but narcissistic traits, narcissistic mechanisms to push away anyone that makes him get closer to that deeper part of himself that doesn't actually feel worthy of existing. So again, he's living from the external mask. And so this is what essentially the self-abandonment is. And so this numbing and coping inside of intimacy will lead him. He's still a human being. He still has wants, he still has needs, he still has difficulties and struggles. And so it will lead him to then want to feel again. He's still a human, he's going to want to feel. So he ends up feeling through seeking intensity outside of the intimate bond, outside of the attachment figure. So when he's with the attachment figure, he shuts down his emotional self, he deadens inside, he represses, and then to feel something, he goes outside of the intimate bond. So again, this may be a person who spends a lot of time partying, who spends a lot of time doing substances, compulsive sexual behaviors. He may, thrill seeking through sort of like extreme sports. He may get addicted to his hobbies. He may get addicted to his social life and need to socialize a lot because he needs a lot of stimulation. He feels himself, he experiences pleasure and joy and aliveness through stimulation that is not tied to any sense of deep connection, because that would equal responsibility and burden in the way that he has learned it in his intimate attachment bonds at home. So again, inside of his intimate attachment bonds, he deadens, and then to feel alive, he goes outside of it. But he feels alive through superficial pleasures. Anything that feels real will cause a sense of responsibility and burden. So he's not going to do that. It's going to be superficial intensity seeking. Okay. I think you can obviously see how this causes an intimacy disorder. It's a type of intimacy avoidance. So he will go on into his adult life being intimacy avoidant, being avoidant of deep attachment, because when he does that, he will project the experience, the unresolved emotions and the unresolved attachment that he has with his own enmeshed mother onto his partner, even though that's not what his partner is trying to get from him. It's a different experience. As a partner, we're coming in as equals to create a shared life together, to create true intimacy, to fill each other's emotional needs. It's appropriate for his partner to want him to fill her emotional needs. It's not appropriate for his mom to want him to fill her emotional needs. That's the problem here. But he projects his unresolved internalized mother figure and his unresolved internalized shame onto his intimate partnership. So he will have a very hard time being intimate, truly intimate. Because again, in intimacy, he repeats the same patterns. He feels dead inside of intimacy, and he will constantly be seeking intensity outside of that intimate bond. So it's going to be very, very hard to create a deep, committed attachment in adulthood for this man and for his partner. And so we'll talk in the next video about how this plays out. Thanks for being here, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.